Please subscribe, like, and share. Hello, before I start, let me just put some acknowledgement there. Matt from Kentucky, a good buddy of mine, he had this thing made for me. It's a small block Ford, okay, and it's neat. I kind of like smile every time I look at this thing, and I told him maybe you guys can make me a cylinder head that we can bolt up and I can put head bolts so forth and so on. Eventually you could probably put a crank and everything here and run a miniaturized Ford or Chevrolet or whatever you might have. And it's detailed. Thank you, Matt, and to your dad. Appreciate this thing, guys. And hey, like I said, I am big supporters of our veterans and those presently serving. And my dad was a jet fighter pilot in the Air Force. My grandpa was a World War II veteran that went through the war, serving in the U.S. Army Intelligence, survived the concentration camps, survived World War II, and eventually died shortly thereafter the war from all the ravages of being in the jungle, and just he paid what the price for his patriotism, fighting for our country. And what's amazing is perhaps he had PTSD, which at that time we don't know. We just think the guy is just shell-shocked. But he died a poor man, lost everything, and may God bless him. And I hope he's in peace. And just like a lot of our veterans out there that we value so much, I do. And appreciate you guys' service. Thank you very much, guys. Matt, Kentucky, and your dad. Thank you very much, guys. Now let's do this video. Hello, good morning, good day, good evening, whatever part of the planet, this crazy world you're coming in from. Welcome to Ben Almy, the Racing Channel. And today we'll talk about dynos. And just like the flow bench here, it's a tool. A dyno is an important tool in the racing, well, in the sport of racing, really, because one of the main things that I've found out through the years, dyno tells you how much ignition timing your engine requires, where the horsepower peaks at before it falls off. Those are indications that are very, very helpful in setting up your race car. For example, setting up or choosing torque converter stall speed is one hell of a hard problem to solve. And one thing is that when we give a torque potential or how much horsepower we have in our combination, the torque converter guy basically takes that and does his thing. But if you're more precise with the information you give him as far as the engine horsepower and torque at what RPM it peaks or across the board, it tells you a lot of information that will help your torque converter guy or your transmission guy, especially if you're trying to get a Lenco or a custom built transmission where you want to split your first and second and third gear, or be it 4-speed, 5-speed, 3-speed. 2-speed is not as critical, but it still matters. Okay, so all those informations are relevant, and it really helps out in the decision making where you're going to end up splitting your gear ratio, your transmission ratios, your converter, even your clutch. Okay, if you have an adjustable clutch or whatever, like a Lenco that you run. And really, all this information is really a treasure trove, and it takes a lot of the guesswork out. Now, for example, when you have a certain type of cylinder head like this TFS, from my experience with Fords and Chevrolets, a lot of the standard run-of-the-mill racing engines you build for not really the crazy high RPM in it, but they would usually ask for 34 degrees for a small block Ford and 36 degrees for a small block Chevy. those things kind of show itself on the dyno. So if you're building a new combination or an old proven combination, somehow you look at your total timing, now it's asking for more, then you got to look at, hey, what happened to my combustion chamber on this head? Or what kind of cylinder head modification did you do? Did you make the combustion chamber bigger, that now it requires more ignition lead in it? So all those things are indication. It also tells you how big a carburetor you can use. Anyway, after all this information, you've done your dyno testing, you go out to the racetrack, now it's a different thing. And I've seen, like not that long ago, this guy had a very impressive Mustang up there in Verona, and his car just won't go. And I told him, hey, did you adjust for this racetrack? You know, it's summertime right now. And doggone, about 5,500, almost close to 6,000 feet. No. He said, it's been dynoed, and it's good as it's gonna get. I said, yeah, but your dyno shop is in San Diego, sea level, and you're here at the high desert. There's just no way that dyno tune will apply to this racetrack. But somehow I think his dyno shop gave him advice to probably do final tuning at the racetrack, but somehow he didn't believe it. He left it the way it is, and until today he's forever slow. Until somebody knocks on his head that he needs to tune for the racetrack. Now, let's touch bases on tuning at the racetrack or even the street. What I notice a lot of people are doing, okay, is that when they build their new combination, whatever it is, usually for the street, a lot of people are not really that up on the compression ratio. Like I've always said on other videos here, the compression ratio, a lot of them built for their street cars are too low. I think you should have a minimum 10.5, but a lot of people are running 8.5, 9-1. I go, that's much too low. You're giving away too much. Now, I talked to an individual not that long ago, and he had a small block, and he told me that his engine's a little bit soft. Coming from the dyno, the engine was really soft. And I said, okay, I think I know what you did. He goes, yeah, well, tell me. Well, you tell me. I said, is this issue, you have, what compression ratio do you have? 9.5, he said. Okay. And how big is your camshaft? I said, oh, this is about 228. I go, oh, with 9-1. 228 with a hydraulic roller. So, 228 with a hydraulic roller, it's a little bit much. Okay? And you're in Las Vegas. He said, yes. Now, what actually happened was, did you try advancing the distributor? He said, yeah, coming from the dyno. Oh, before I went to the dyno, I advanced the timing. You know, the factory calls for 6 degrees, and I went all the way, 16 degrees actually, he said. Oh, okay, that sounds about right. Because once you put a high performance camshaft, your dynamic compression, your working compression drops significantly. You can see that in your compression gauge. Before you probably had 160 or 170. Now you put your juice camshaft in there. Now you're down to 150. That's an indication that your dynamic compression took a dive. Hence the response, the low end torque, mid-range are flat. He said, exactly. Now, I said, when you went up 10 degrees from 6, and then eventually you ended up with 16. Have you noticed that it started responding? He was, yeah, it responded big time. It really picked up. I go, well, that's telling you that your initial timing should be ramped up. Most, if not all, engines with high performance cam or aftermarket camshafts, not the RV type, aftermarket high performance camshaft, you have to advance your base timing, your tip-in timing. If you don't, if your full advance comes in at 4,000, 5,000, it's too late. You have to bring that in as early as possible. If you need it at 2,000, be it. If you have a low gear ratio and a high stall converter, you can ramp it up initially real quick, all in by 2,000 RPM. His stock type distributor with a vacuum advance, mind you, he was all the way, I was 6 or 8 degrees is what he said. And what actually happened was that when I advanced it, it picked up a lot of low speed torque, so he left it at that. Then he went to the dyno. As soon as he ran on the dyno, the guy automatically told him, wow, you got too much advance. It's detonating towards the big end on the long pull, okay? Because they do a lot of top gear pull for the dyno. Now, his total timing, I think, ended up at like 44 degrees. So when the dyno guy looks at that, and it's a small block Ford with dart heads, so when he knocked down the ignition timing to like 34 degrees where it should be, this was on a sea-level dyno, where it should be, what happened was it was 44, he knocked it down to 34, 10 degrees, okay? 10 degrees total there. When he knocked it down, what happened was his initial timing also went down. So he was happy. He goes, oh man, I'm making about, I think he said 380 horsepower. Not bad for a little small block 302. I go, yeah, that's good. So he paid the guy the dyno time and everything, and he jumped back in the car, and then he takes off. He calls me up, he says, Ben, I did make 380 horsepower, but the doggone thing after the dyno shoot, it was a dog after the dyno tune or trying to get my horsepower. It was a dog. I said, yep, you have the potential and it does make 380 horse, but your timing is the one that's lagging behind. I said, go get an MSD distributor, all right, and then we'll reset it. So this, oh man, this is long ago. So we have an MSD full centrifugal now. And I took out and put him at 16 again. But I limited his distributor total timing to 34, where it should be. Okay? Now, with 34, no, I think it's 38 for this racetrack. Yeah, for Vegas, it was at 38. For sea level, it was at 34 degrees. Now, when I ramped up that much timing again for the sea level tune, his response came back. He goes, man, now it's responding, and of course there's no detonation on the big end. Correct. Now I said, when you go to Vegas, you're roughly, usually summertime there, 3,000, 4,000 feet is not uncommon. The air is thin, especially in the summer months. So I told him, you're 16, you add another 3 or 4 degrees. Oh my God, I'm gonna be about 20 degrees. That's okay. That's okay. You're at high altitude. So now you're 16, now 17, 18, 19, 20 degrees initial. Okay, then you add 34 more on the top at 2,500 RPM. Set that up at 38 degrees. Now, when he did that, happy. Now it's running around Las Vegas with 38 total instead of 34 for sea level, and then his initial timing is 20 degrees initial. Don't be afraid if you have low compression. It will not detonate, especially when you get a light car and you got stiff gearing, high stall converter, 3500, super whole shot converter, or even whole shot converter. It will tolerate it. Okay, don't be afraid to put timing in there. Now, that is not uncommon. I see that happen all the time. In fact, when I live at Palmdale, when I did an engine for people there, I asked them, what part of the city you're? Oh, I'm in Lancaster. I go, okay, 3,000 feet average. All right. I put their timing in, but I tell them, what you gotta do is that put one of them dial timing thing, hook up to the MSD. When you go down to sea level, just back it down 3 or 4 degrees, and you're going to be fine. And then when you go up again to Palmdale, back from Canoga Park or Glendale or whatever part of the city you went, bring the timing up. And he's been always tweaking that ignition timing knob, and it's helped a lot for him. Except he couldn't change the jetting on the carburetor. So until you go to sea level and you're gonna go racing, yeah, I would say bring your jet kit box and rejet the carburetor, or go on your computer laptop and put your fuel tables up when you're sea level. Now, again, touching on the dyno. Another example was another friend of mine who's got a 7-second import, very fast, and he spent a lot of hours on the dyno, got it perfect. He goes up to the line at Irwindale, he revs the clutch, he drops the clutch, and it bogs down. The dyno does not tell you how much you ramp up the timing, how much lead time you got to put in there when you leave the line. In fact, on some of our engines, I do this. If my Yates-headed engine before required 30 degrees total timing, okay, with 16 to 1. When I let go of the trans brake, I put in 4 degrees above my 30, just in first gear for a fraction of a second, just to hit the slicks and launch me as hard as I could. Okay, I ramp up the timing just for a nanosecond, just for me to hit the slick and get some wheel speed out of there, and I'm up. You can do the same thing. Now, if you're a supercharger or nitrous oxide, I'm not going to tell you how much to decrease your timing at how long a duration. You can also take timing out. When you, especially with small tires, when you launch off the line, a fraction of a second, take off some of that ignition timing, ignition lead out. That'll soften the launch of the car. And then ramp it back up as soon as you're launching or you're on the way. You can ramp it all back up, or increments of, retard of 6, down to 4, down to 2, and then to 0, then you're on the way. This is how you play the game. The dyno will not tell you that. It can't. You're not launching off the line on the dyno. There are G-forces acting on the flow ball, or on the fuel cell, on the fuel pump. Everything is changed. The dyno, and the one thing also the dyno will not show you, okay, how hard does your car leave the line. If I have a heavy flywheel, I rev it up and drop the clutch, they'll dictate to me how much ignition lead I put in, I ramp in, or I take out initially with a heavy clutch. Now, if you have a lightning flywheel, okay, you really need to ramp it up and anticipate your lack of low end torque with more ignition lead time. Now, when you have a light flywheel, the dyno doesn't see that either, because now you're launching off the line or coming out of a corner. All these things you gotta play by seat of the pants, or with your data you get on your race pack. It'll tell you exactly what the car is doing. Okay, so in fact, one incident was, we're at another racetrack where when we're taking off NA, when we go to second gear, we're running a 3-speed torque flight. When we go to second gear, the car wants to lift up, wants to pick up the front bumper and drag the rear when we go to second gear. So guess what we did? As soon as we change the gear, we take timing out just to settle the car down. Keeps it from getting a wheel stand in second gear, past the 60 foot. Okay, the car wants to lift up. In fact, we lost a race. That way, we took off hard. We ramped up the timing off the line. It's NA. Boom, out of the gate. As soon as we hit second gear, the timing is retarded. Now it's back up to its normal thing. Okay? I mean, the timing is retarded so that when we go to second gear, the front end doesn't come up. Well, that time, we tried. We didn't retard the timing going to second gear, and the car lifted up again. We lost a big race. Okay, so hey, it's just one of those things. What do you do at the top of the gear? You know, now it's pulling hard from first gear, going through the quarter mile. Your combustion chamber's overheating more than it would on the dyno, perhaps. You take 2 degrees out, okay, because the chamber is getting hot. It wants to detonate, get secondary ignition on the combustion chamber or any hot spot in the engine combustion chamber. You gotta knock that sucker down. The dyno, you're in a pristine environment, usually not the same situation as you are at the racetrack. And a lot of them are at sea level, and you're racing at Colorado Springs, somewhere out there, Mile High Nationals, and it's 5,000–6,000 feet. You got to ramp up that timing, okay? And another thing that, oh, okay. Here's another situation. I had an engine, well, engines, 3 of them from one shop. And I was always wondering, I look at the dyno sheet, it's making 800 horsepower, 850 horsepower. That's a lot of power. But amazingly, these cars will not 60 foot out of the gate. It will not leave the line. And these 3 guys showed me their dyno sheets. Impressive. But it's running like it's 100 horsepower less or more. At Verona, it can't cut a 5-second pass for 850 horsepower. Now, eventually, when I said, take the engine back to me when it's time to freshen it up, or just take it apart and take it off the car and take it to me and let me take a look. Amazingly, when I took apart, the head flowed excellent. It's got good compression, but the timing is 6 degrees retarded from where it is set up at. You know, when you retard the camshaft, what happens there is the intake valve closes late. At high RPM, you're gonna get a very good horsepower. Anyone, like they say, timing gear versus, a gear drive versus a timing chain. The gear drive will hold the cam timing, granted it's at 0 or whatever the manufacturer says it is. Now you're at 0 with a gear drive. You put a timing chain on and they go up, hey man, I went a little quicker. I said a little mile an hour. Of course, the timing chain would retard at high RPM. Excellent. It's a built-in horsepower edge. Now, back to this 3 engines from this group of guys. And I was like, 6 degrees. So what I did was I did some minor changes on the heads. Amazing when I remember these things. And I put the camshaft where it was at. Actually, it was at 2 degrees forward from what I looked at the cam card. Now, I bet you, if you go back to the dyno, okay, with this engine now at +2 advanced instead of 6 retarded, or retard, not retarded. Anyway, the horsepower would probably be lower. But when you look at the lower RPM range, it'd probably be fatter. But if you're racing dynos and you're racing maximum horsepower, regardless of what it does on the low mid ranges, you're going to be in trouble. Just like when you use this doggone floor bench and just go after maximum flow, regardless if the velocity suffered, okay, the ability of the fuel and air to be held in suspension. This can do that. It can really stifle that mixing process. It can lose velocity. Now, velocity in the port is very important besides flow. Now, coming back to this first guy that I did an engine for. When it's now 2 degrees forward, They ran at the track. Suddenly, this doggone thing eventually went like 540. Before I can even cut a 5.7 pass. I mean, 6 flat was all I could do. 610, 609, 6. I go, what? Now it's 540, 550. Nothing's changed. Same piston, same head, just some minor changes. But now the camshaft's where it should be. I told the owner, if you take it back to the dyno, you may have lost quite a bit here. But what happened now was that his 60-foot was in the low 120s. Before it was like 129, 130, 130. Now it's like 121. In fact, I think I did a 119. What happened there is that his dynamic compression bumped up with the camshaft where it should be, not late valve timing or cam timing. And that doggone thing ran fast. Now, coming back to the other guy, it's got a supercharged small block Ford. I looked, and his experience is the same way. He went to the dyno, did some massive work on the intake manifold, and the doggone thing lost 60-foot time. Now the manifold, he cut back the plenum, got bigger. This is supercharged 347. They took the plenum, they pulled back the runners, so now it's got a bigger plenum. It supposedly picked up more CFM, more intake flow, so forth and so on. But now the car will not 60-foot. It was lazy. You won't get out of its way. But if you want to race a half a mile, oh yeah, he'll go by you. But half a mile is not a quarter mile. You don't have the convenience of time. You need the power now. That's the difference between an instantaneous throttle response or a top-end engine. If we're all running Bonneville or Silver State here, sure, I'd be with you there. But you got a quarter mile with a somewhat heavy car. It's not a flyweight, fiberglass, funny car. Now, this doggone thing did not go anywhere. When I split it apart, the heads are decent again. The compression's where it should be for a supercharged combination. The camshaft looked good until I look, it's 6 degrees retarded again. Wow. So I said, when you dyno this thing, it made a lot of power, no doubt. Okay? Regardless of what it does on a lower RPM range, you're chasing that number. And that's what they did. So now I put it straight up. Now the car couldn't even hook up with so much power. But I bet if it was back on the dyno, it might have lost quite a bit on the peak horsepower. But the low, mid-ranges, everything would have picked up. Amazing. Now, another incident, 20 plus years ago. I had an engine that, on my street car. My street car was a LX Mustang then, with a stroker, 4170 stroke, big stroke, in a stock block. And this car will run 1020s all day on a muffler. In fact, one guy told me before, that ain't no street car, that's a race car. I said, really? What do you define as a street car? Well, if you can do pass to pass without popping the hood, cooling down, that's a street car. Okay, you know what? I'll prove to you. I'll jump on the freeway with you. We'll go whatever you want. I got 389 gears on the back with a C4. With a 4500, 5000 stall converter. Lots of compression. I still do a bunch of these engine combinations for the street. Ran on the freeway out there by Famoso. Get back. Lined up. Did 4 passes nonstop. Made a pass. 1020, 1021, 20. Keep coming back. Without cooling down, we'll line up, run again. 4 times till I smoked the transmission. We had to prove it because we hated this guy that was talking a lot of smack. C4 on the 4th run, it like went 1050, burned the transmission up. Now that's back to back, no popping hood, no changing, just pass, go back to the staging lane, run again. It was one of those weekends where there wasn't many cars. So I did like 4 passes, like less than 45 minutes. No cooldown, basically. That is a street car. Now, a guy bought this engine, followed us home, yanked the engine out, took it to the shop. They dyno tested it, and they're not impressed. Okay, 4170. This is not a rever. It had DFS high port heads back then, just like this one here. Now, they went through the flow bench. Oh, mind you, it had 30-degree seats also on the head. 30 requires, will make the head flow big time on the lower lifts. At that time, I had a 640, 660 lift. That car ran with those kind of gear 389s, whatever. I lost my track because the doggone thing stopped taping. I'm continuing on. Now, I would leave the line with this car, brake torque it, bring it up to about 1500, 1800, let go of the brake, mash the pedal, boom, 1020. Coming back, now remember. So this guy followed us home, pulled the engine out, and I basically said, and my friend, don't change anything. Put it on your, this was a 3,080 pound car. Put in your 2,700 pound race car and you will go fast. You'll go in the midnights easily. Well, they took it apart, flow tested it, took the 850 annular discharge carburetor, put a 1050 Dominator, changed the camshaft, did some, put the 45 seat in it on the head again, changed the whole thing. Before I used to just brake torque it, boom, it shift at 6,800 and it'll go 1020. So they gain all sorts of horsepower, so forth and so on this big stroker Ford Windsor. This is back in 1991, 92. Now, by the time they were done, they said they made lots of power, different camshaft now, so forth and so on. The heads have been done, and now this guy is sporting a Dominator 1050 instead of the 850 annual discharge. So now it goes to a car's 2,700 pounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. 400 pounds lighter. Guess how fast it went? 1050. That was it. They lost the strongest point of this torque motor. Even if they ran the same after 400 pounds lighter, that's still not an equal or an improvement. Like I said, they were racing the dyno, so I don't know how big a camshaft they put in it that the big arm stroker Windsor couldn't take. So there they are, slowed down big time. And today, I still remember that. What in the world happened? Okay, so, but then again, maybe they took the timing out or whatever they did. Heaven knows what they've done. But they had a very good 9-second engine. They did improvements. They raced the dyno and they raced the flow bench and ended up with neither one made power. Now, let me just rehash back. A lot of things after the dyno is you ramp up your ignition lead time, ramp it up to 2,000, 2,500 RPM. Don't be afraid, okay? Even on your fuel injected car, put a lot of ignition timing in it, especially you're at, high altitude or just on the racetrack. Don't be afraid to put it. Big camshafts require a lot of ignition lead time. The total timing is indeed important, but big camshafts will require no wonder we run lock distributor. okay, on my car. I'm locked 30 degrees at idle. It will not detonate even with 16 to 1 because I have no cylinder pressure. My dynamic compression is really down in the dumps. Okay, so my distributor is locked. Most of these guys are. They're locked. Now, I had one incident as well where another guy had one of my engine and they dynoed it and they took compression out of the engine. And I go, why did you take compression out? It's got a big enough camshaft, it will have no difficulty starting. Oh, it has a tough time starting. Okay, granted, maybe it did, where they live. Okay, that's fine. The new guy dropped the compression down. And I said, that's a wrong move. Why just put a start retard switch on there? So that when you're, or an ignition, you're cranking and then you turn on the hot switch. Boom. Anytime you take compression or squeeze out of that air fuel mix, you're gonna lose power. There's nobody out there that gain power at lower compression, except you have other side issues. But generally, the lower the compression, the lower the power. That's why these new Mustangs, these new Corvettes, Hellcat, they're fast because they come from the factory with, I think, 11.5 or 12.5 to 1. It's amazing. They got compression, they got ignition timing with a high swirl head, lots of tumble. It does make a difference. So make sure you put the ignition lead in your street car, hot rod, whatever, you know, weekend warrior. Don't be afraid. Put 16, 14 when you're sea level, or maybe higher when you're up at Colorado Springs or Utah, whatever you're at, or Vegas, here in Vegas. Don't be afraid when you have a camshaft, and just limit your total timing, but put as much initial timing at idle and above, and let it ramp in to 2,500 RPM, all in, or 2,000, and you won't be disappointed. Okay? So when you tell somebody, oh, we went to the dyno, it slowed down, but it showed a lot of power. Well, that's one of the reasons it slowed down. Okay? Your dyno guy saw where the ignition lead has to be, and that's where he locked it in. Then you go back out, no response. All right? So that's just one, should I say, oversight a lot of dyno shops kind of miss. And guys that track test, like me, that's where we come into play. The dyno guys are excellent. They do their job. Very many of them do. There's you or somebody like me are the track guys. We do the fine tuning. Okay, so those are things you gotta really look at and understand what is going on. Correct? But anyway, please like, subscribe to Ben Alameda Racing, so we'll keep this going. Okay, guys? Take care. Bye-bye. Please subscribe, like, and share.